If you're going to talk about Harry Potter characters, sooner or later you got to talk about Lord Voldemort. I'd rather not. There are people in the world who are just plain evil. It's not a pleasant subject to talk about or to contemplate. There are people I don't like, there are people I can't stand, there are people I don't want anything to do with. But it's really a bad and sad thing to have to think that there are people in the world for whom they have absolutely no redeemable attributes whatsoever. They're just totally evil. And ultimately, their only destiny is to be destroyed, because that's what's going to be better for everyone else. Such was the case with Lord Voldemort. Lord Voldemort was born Tom Marvolo Riddle. He was a direct descendant of Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 founding wizards of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Just as Salazar Slytherin was a parcel-mouth who could speak to snakes, so was Voldemort. Voldemort's mother was a witch who was thought for a while to be a squib. She was sort of a forlorn, abused woman in this family. The family descended from Salazar Slytherin. It fell into really a lot of disrepute, and they lived in kind of this trashy environment, and somehow or the other Tom Riddle's mother hooked up with a muggle, and they got married, and he was born of that marriage. The husband ultimately left, his mother died, and Tom Riddle ended up in an orphanage at a very young age. Little Hangleton was the name of the village that his mother was from. Interesting, because Harry Potter was from Little Whinging. So I might have to do a little bit of research and see if those are some kind of opposites. But that's very interesting. He ended up in an orphanage at a very young age, and it was obvious to all that there was something wrong with this kid. I mean, when you first see the young Tom Riddle in the Half-Blood Prince, you think you're meeting Damien Thorne or someone. He had no visitors the entire first 11 years of his life that he was there at the orphanage. He discovered his powers at a young age, discovered he could make things happen to people he did not like, discovered he could steal things, discovered he could talk to snakes. The orphanage took the kids on a trip to a location by the sea that ultimately Voldemort would use to hide one of his Horcruxes. And there in a cave, something happened between Tom Riddle and a couple of the kids, and the kids in some fashion were damaged. As he turned 11, Professor Dumbledore, who was not yet headmaster, Professor Dippet was still the headmaster, visited Tom Riddle at the orphanage. And apparently the Ministry of Magic and the Hogwarts people thought that they could teach Tom to be a good wizard and control his magic. Dumbledore later said he had no idea that he had just met the most powerful and most dangerous dark wizard that would ever live. Tom goes to Hogwarts, and the only really good thing that you can say about him was that he was a very serious student dedicated to becoming a proficient wizard. Not necessarily a good wizard, but a proficient wizard. When he was a student, you still didn't see any good qualities about him. All you saw about him that could possibly be called good was that he was a serious student. He became fascinated with the idea of immortality. He acquired a number of followers, and it's hard to imagine why anybody would want to follow Tom Riddle, except that they were malcontents, and sometimes malcontents want to do things to hurt other people, to get revenge on other people, and they possibly thought Tom Riddle was the key to doing that. Tom sought a position as a professor at Hogwarts. He could not get on, but during his time as a student, he cozied up somewhat to Horace Slughorn. Now, I don't know what that Slughorn saw in him other than that he was a very serious student, but he was reading about Horcruxes in a restricted section in the library, and he didn't really understand what that was all about, but he knew that he wanted to be immortal. He convinces Slughorn to tell him about Horcruxes, and Slughorn tells him that a Horcrux is an object in which a person has concealed part of his soul. Tom Riddle wants to know how to do this, and Slughorn explains that it's murder. And of course, Slughorn is horrified that the subject came up, and he said, "This is all academic, isn't it, Tom?" And Tom said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah. He was just reading, he was just curious, and he wanted to know about it." But after being denied a teaching position at Hogwarts, and presumably he wanted to teach so he could learn more about the dark arts, he acquired a following. At some point later in his life, he acquired a following and endeavored to take over the wizard world and to be the absolute ruler of the wizard world. But there was something that was going to get in his way. An old prophecy, originally uttered by Sybil Trelawney, stated that a boy would be born at the end of July in a particular year who would have the ability to defeat Voldemort. That could have applied to two young wizards, either Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom. And Neville ends up being a fantastic character. Really grew to like that character as I read through the books and saw the movies, Neville Longbottom, and he is in the end a hero. But Trelawney said that neither one could live while the other survives. So Voldemort zeroes in on Harry as the one that he decides to kill. And he goes to Godric's Hollow after being informed by Peter Pettigrew that the Potters are there. He goes to Godric's Hollow and murders Harry's parents and attempts to murder him. But through the sacrificial love in blocking Voldemort from killing her son, Lily Potter does the one thing that is able to save him from Voldemort. Voldemort is totally devoid of goodness and love. He does not understand anything about it, and as he attempts to kill Harry Potter, the curse rebounds, leaving him in a diminished state. And it's such a state where he has a sort of a rudimentary body, but he has to survive by sharing bodies with other people and constantly being helped by other people, and he doesn't have a full body after that. But the love of Lily Potter for her son rebounded, and Harry was spared, and Voldemort was seriously diminished for a long time. So he begins his quest to return, to get a new body and to return. Harry, meanwhile, grows up with the Dursleys, and then at age 11 goes to Hogwarts, and Voldemort from the very beginning is trying to kill Harry because of that prophecy that, Trelawney had uttered, although he doesn't know exactly what it says, but the prophecy said that neither could live while the other neither could survive while the other lived. So in the Sorcerer's Stone, Voldemort tries to kill Harry in the forest. He's interrupted by a centaur who drives him away, who he's able to do this because Voldemort is in a diminished state, and that he has at this point stolen and drunk blood of unicorns, which are pure creatures, and they do protect a person from death, but the person who survives does so in a way that most people would never want to live, because it's a cursed life from then on. He attempts to steal the Sorcerer's Stone and is thwarted by Harry Potter through the efforts of Professor Quirrell. And in the final confrontation, Voldemort attempts to kill Harry again, but Quirrell just disintegrates because he doesn't know anything about love either, and that mark that was left on Harry, the love mark, so to speak, destroyed Quirrell, and Voldemort is left to find some other way to survive again. And the Chamber of Secrets, Voldemort, in the form of Tom Riddle stepping out of the pages of the diary, which is a Horcrux, lures Ginny Weasley into the Chamber of Secrets. Harry goes there and fights him there and overcomes him with the help of Fawkes the Phoenix, and once again Voldemort is defeated after causing a lot of trouble at Hogwarts. The Prisoner of Azkaban focuses on the plight of Sirius Black, and not a lot about Voldemort there to the same extent that you have in the other books. But in the Goblet of Fire, Voldemort is finally able to come back, and he does so through the efforts of Peter Pettigrew, Wormtail, and Barty Crouch Jr., who is masquerading as Mad-Eye Moody and transforms the Triwizard Cup into a portkey, which transports Cedric Diggory and Harry Potter to the graveyard in Little Hangleton. At that point, Voldemort is able to return through the efforts of Peter Pettigrew, who throws his body, his rudimentary body, in a mixture in this cauldron, and then Voldemort emerges. He attempts to kill Harry, but the reverse spell effect occurs, and Harry's parents reappear, and the spirit of Cedric Diggory reappears, and Harry is able to escape Voldemort once again. And through all of this, it's discovered by a lot of people that Voldemort has returned. In the Order of the Phoenix, we discover that Cornelius Fudge, the Ministry of Magic, is totally corrupt. And Voldemort runs wild for a while, controlling Hogwarts. Dolores Umbridge is installed, and a lot of evil happens in the Order of the Phoenix. But ultimately, Harry and Dumbledore are vindicated. And the Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore prepares Harry for the final battle, and the mystery of the Horcruxes is discovered, that Voldemort has split his soul 7 times and concealed part of his soul in various Horcruxes. So Harry sets out on the mission to destroy the Horcruxes after the death of Dumbledore at the hands of Severus Snape, who is actually a double agent. And so then in the Deathly Hallows you have Ron and Hermione and Harry chasing down Horcruxes and destroying them. This culminates in the Battle of Hogwarts. At the Battle of Hogwarts, it at first appears that Harry's been killed by the killing curse, but he goes to someplace in the beyond and has a conversation with Dumbledore. It seems he's been protected by love once again, that the killing curse wasn't able to kill him. And after his conversation with Dumbledore, he makes the decision to return to the living, and Hagrid, he pretends to be dead for a while Hagrid carries him toward the castle, and Voldemort's supporters are walking up toward the castle, and we think for a while, or at least the Hogwarts people think, that Harry is dead, but he isn't really dead. He reveals himself to be alive, and after Neville Longbottom steps forward, and Neville is such a great character, and challenges Voldemort, and then the battle ensues again, and in the process of the battle, Neville kills the snake Nagini, which happens to be a Horcrux. Harry had been a Horcrux, but that ended in the attempt to kill Harry by Voldemort, and ultimately Harry is able to destroy Voldemort because the Elder Wand is not functioning for Voldemort, because it didn't really belong to him. It turned out it really belonged to Draco Malfoy. So what do we see with Lord Voldemort? He is ultimately destroyed, and in the case of an irredeemably, just intractably evil person, sometimes that has to happen. And that's a harsh concept to think about. It is in certain ways profoundly sad to think that a person can be so absolutely, totally evil that they have to be destroyed. And yet that is what Voldemort was. In Voldemort you see the personification of evil. He was as satanic a character, I believe, as I have ever seen portrayed on the silver screen or in a book without being Satan himself. But ultimately, love conquers all, good conquers evil, and the plans that Voldemort had come to nothing. The Death Eaters are defeated. No doubt many of them go on trial and are sent to Azkaban. Kingsley Shacklebolt takes over as Minister of Magic, and relative peace is restored once again to the wizarding world. The only real life lesson that I think we can draw from Voldemort is it illustrates the fact, unfortunately, that there are people in the world who are just profoundly evil. That's not a very pleasant thing to think about. And it is in certain ways, as I believe I already said, a profoundly sad thing to think about. But I want to believe, and I do believe, that good ultimately triumphs over evil, and that is what we see in the saga of Harry Potter. That ultimately good was more powerful than evil, and love conquered all. Lord Voldemort played a role in that. It was the bad role, it was the evil role, but he ultimately demonstrated that evil can be defeated by love, and I believe that it can. And that's what we can learn from the miserable life of Lord Voldemort, who was destroyed and peace once again restored, relative peace anyway, to the wizarding world. And that's my take on Lord Voldemort.